LegalizeFreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Beyond politics, poverty and war. LegalizeFreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Luigi Sciambarella of the Monroe Institute, who joins us to discuss altered states, lucid dreams, and the evolution of consciousness. Out-of-body experiences and other altered states of consciousness offer some of the most compelling evidence that reality extends beyond our five senses, and that consciousness itself transcends death. These experiences can also lead to awareness that the universe is fundamentally a multidimensional energy field and that all things within it are connected. Such realizations hold powerful potential for personal growth, self-healing, problem-solving, creativity, and ultimately profound spiritual awakening. Hello and welcome, Luigi, and thank you so much for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
Thank you for inviting me, Greg.
Now, Luigi, today we're going to discuss some of your work with the Monroe Institute, which basically, for people who don't know, it's a non-profit research and education organisation dedicated to enhancing the uses and understanding of human consciousness. So perhaps just to set the scene, you could tell us a little bit about your background, about the Monroe Institute, and how you started this work.
The Monroe Institute, as you probably read, was established by Robert Monroe. And he was a Virginia businessman who, in the late 1950s, started having experiences which completely altered his perception of reality. And these were things that he couldn't ignore. They were experiences that at the time didn't even have a term. They became known, and his book certainly popularized the term out-of-body experiences. And he wasn't a religious person by any means, so he didn't have a framework in which to operate, and that really helped because he didn't laden it with any sort of dogmatic language, and he wanted to explore what it was. Because he was wealthy, he was able to get himself assessed and checked out by medical professionals, and they've sort of told him, Bob, other than maybe being stressed at work or something like that, there's not anything particularly wrong with you. Your brain looks okay. Your mental health is fine. There's nothing physically wrong with you. You don't have a tumor or anything like that. So just go away and get some rest. But the experiences kept happening. And so once he realized that these experiences weren't going to kill him, he became very curious and wanted to know what they were all about. So he was able to set up a research division with his broadcasting company, his radio company, and they kind of did some research using sound and sleep learning, and really that's where it all stemmed from. Seeing if we could learn during our sleep, and Bob was a primary guinea pig in that research, and that's probably one of the main reasons why he started having the out-of-body experiences, because he was playing around a lot with different sound technology to get him into these deep sleep states. But what we find is that as you start to get your body to go to sleep but keep your mind slightly awake, then a lot of experiences can start to happen that you become conscious of. So from that early work and early research, just a really long story short, Bob Monroe developed a technology which he then called Hemi-Sync, which is short for hemispheric synchronization. And this is a binaural beat technology. So nowadays you'll find a lot of different sort of audio guidance technologies that guide people's brains into particular states of consciousness. Well, Bob Monroe and his research team were really the pioneers of that technology. It was the first time that binaural beats were used to guide the brain into different states of consciousness. And that was really the beauty of Bob's approach, because it was a scientific approach. Here we're using technology to get yourself into particular states, and it's easily done. I mean, you don't have to really do anything. You just put a headset on, some headphones, some earphones, whatever you feel most comfortable with. You can even sit between speakers if you wanted to. And gently, within about 5 or 10 minutes, then your brain is going to be following the guidance of the particular tones that you're listening to. Now, on top of that, Bob Monroe started to refine his experiences and really started to map out the territory which you could explore once you start to move into altered states. And the first one that he really came across was the mind awake, body asleep state, which he called Focus 10. Bob didn't really attach anything particular to the label. He just called it 10 because this was a number that he could assign to a particular state of consciousness without having to refer to any sort of dogmatic terminology. So he invented the focus levels as they were. And the idea here is that right now you're in a particular state of consciousness, the waking state. We call that C1 consciousness or consciousness 1. And just like you turn the dial of a radio to tune into different channels, you can do that with your own consciousness. And so as you start to move slightly out of phase, slightly out of coherence with the physical system, you can start to move into other states of consciousness that are kind of around you all the time anyway, much like radio signals are around you all the time now. So using your own mental apparatus, you can tune into these different focus levels. So starting with something like Focus 10, which is a state of mind awake, body asleep, and then expanding out into something like Focus 12, which is a state of expanded awareness, all the way through to, different belief system territories and systems that are quite seemingly far away from the physical system, like Focus 27 or something like that. But you can really explore these whilst obviously being a physical being, and certainly without having to do too much. In fact, effort really is counterproductive to this process, because you kind of have to allow the technology to work together with your intention in order to be able to move into these states. So I went to university and studied psychology. I'd had some experiences when I was younger, around about 7 years old, that really made me question I suppose, the present understanding of reality. At the time, obviously, I wouldn't have used these sorts of terms. I just thought there's something weird going on. I started having lucid dream experiences, which, as you may know, are dreams where you are conscious within the dream state. And I started receiving communications in those states. So I really was interested in what it all meant. Then as I went through school, life kind of gets in the way and you get distracted by different things. And it was only really when I went back to university that I wanted to explore consciousness. And unfortunately, our education system really isn't geared up to exploring mental states in a sort of experiential way. There's a lot of theoretical stuff. We're still kind of trying to shed the behavioral way of thinking, which has now kind of been replaced by things like cognitive neuroscience. But really the focus is more on stuff like neural correlates of consciousness. So I was still having experiences at university that didn't really marry up. I met a friend there who I still work with and is also a trainer in this country, Phil Davidson. And we started doing a lot of hypnosis in the lab. And I started accessing some of those states that I was accessing when I was younger. At that time, Phil then decided that it might help the whole process and speed things up a lot more if we started introducing Hemi-Sync, this technology designed by Bob and his team. And it certainly did just that. Before, in the early days with the research in the soundproof room that we used, it would probably take about a couple of hours in order for me to start getting into the zone. Whereas with Hemi-Sync, it took me about maybe 20 minutes. And then from there, we were able to sort of test a lot of things in altered states. it was only after that I decided that really, I wanted to engage with the Monroe Institute directly. I wanted to go to a program, but the idea of a poor student going over to the U.S. to sort of a residential program was more of a fantasy than a possible reality. But we were fortunate enough to find out that the programs actually took place in Spain at the time with Carol de la Haran, who became the president and passed earlier this year. But we were lucky enough to go to Gateway in Spain, and I had some incredible experiences there, which really put a different take on the experiences that I've been having up to then, and give me a sort of different way of looking at things. And after that, I really wanted to start spreading the information, start getting more people to experience things for themselves. And I was really surprised when I first started looking that there was nobody in the UK who was running the programs, given that all the exercises are in English. Bob Monroe spoke his American English, and his voice is usually the one that's on the exercises. So it was really easy to be able to migrate it. And so we looked around and thought, okay, well, instead of wishing that somebody else is going to appear and start doing this, why don't we do it? And so we did a few more programs and signed up to the training, and that's where we are now. So that was 3 years ago that we did our first weekend workshop, and last year we brought over the Gateway Voyage program, which is the flagship 6-day residential program that they do at the Monroe Institute, which Bob Monroe designed back in the early 70s. And this year we repeated it. And next year we are also going to be doing it again, but also bringing the Lifeline program. So we're really starting to expand what we do at the Monroe Institute over here in the UK.
As you alluded to when you mentioned the education system a couple of minutes ago, certainly in the West anyway, we live in a reductionistic, materialistic, science-based society, and out-of-body experiences, altered states of consciousness, if they're considered seriously at all, they're considered secondary epiphenomenons of the brain that really don't have any importance or meaning, no significance whatsoever. And at worst, quite often, it's considered some sort of pathology, some sort of mental illness. That if you went to your average GP, I would imagine, and said, look, I'm starting to be hovering above my body at night, or whatever sort of altered state experience you were having, you would quite possibly be referred to a psychologist.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, this was quite the funny thing. When I was at university and I was having experiences, I was going out of body and having lucid dreams all the time. And I was even manifesting visual phenomena with my eyes open in the daytime. And I'm studying psychology at the time. So I'm thinking, well, these are classic schizophrenia hallmarks. These are pointers that I'm having some sort of psychotic episode. But the main word here, Greg, is control. And, if you have these experiences switched on and have absolutely no idea how they arise and can't distinguish them from the standard sort of C1 consciousness, the waking reality, then maybe you could have some problems, mostly related to being able to distinguish between what's happening in altered state and what's happening in physical reality. Without a body experiences, I was inducing them. I was lying down, I was listening to an exercise, and then I was going out of body. So it's not that it was just happening spontaneously. I mean, maybe that was the case when I was younger, but here we have tools that allow you to be able to move into these states and do so deliberately. Also, what you might consider altered states are really natural phenomena. We go through these states throughout the day anyway. Mostly at night time, we pass through states that are out-of-body states, and we're just not conscious of them. And that's the main thing. We're now training ourselves to be conscious through the processes that we go through in the day and night. And that's something that you can learn to do. Most people, they might lie down at night, and when the mind goes to sleep and the body goes to sleep, it happens at the same time, and therefore that's when you slip into dreamland, and maybe you remember your dreams and maybe you don't, and then you wake up in the morning and you think about going to work or whatever. And that's the kind of standard procedure, but it doesn't have to be like that. Body going to sleep is something that's separate from your mind going to sleep, and you can unlearn that process. It doesn't mean that the two have to happen at the same time. So suddenly you have a very natural situation where your body's asleep, your mind's wide awake, and then phenomena like the dream state starts to arise, and you're aware of it arising, and you become conscious in that state. This is something that just takes some practice and intention. You need to know that you can do it, and then you need to have the tools to do it. But you're already equipped with it because you already go into these states anyway at night. So it's just a practice effect. So when we say that, our society doesn't really accept altered state phenomena, well, most of the time you're kind of in an altered state. I mean, if you're consciously present in the moment all the time, then you're probably walking around as a Buddha. Most people are either living in the past, or living in the future. We're either thinking about what happened and how we could have done things differently, and who said what at work, and how that might have annoyed you or something like that. Or you're thinking about what's coming next, planning for a holiday, or planning what you're going to do tomorrow, and what you're going to say to that person when you next see them, and that kind of thing. So very rarely do we actually live in the now. And that sort of daydreaming that we go through is an altered state of consciousness. It's taking you away from being fully present right now. So the idea here is not that you're going to be moving into states that are completely alien to you. You're going into states that maybe you've not really entered consciously and held for very long, but they're states that you do pass through in a day cycle naturally and every day.
Well, you made a comment there about control. I did an interview with an American psychologist called Kirby Surprise, who'd written a book called Synchronicity. Now, he's a psychologist quite often dealing with people who are having severe psychotic breaks, paranoid schizophrenics. He's been able to help some of them by bringing them to an understanding that their thoughts are being reflected back to them. Even their subconscious is being reflected back to them and what actually happens in their lives. And once they realize that they have a degree of control over this, and that they're not actually going mad, and that, as you said, this is all part of who we are as biological beings, but also energetic beings, then that really changes everything. It doesn't mean that maybe you might want to stop having these episodes. Maybe that doesn't happen, but it really helps to put it in perspective that this is not necessarily a descent into madness.
Absolutely not. And I mean, it's quite funny because I've had some phone calls from people who were originally extremely frightened. They call me up, and I mean, people find us usually as a last resort when it's that kind of phone call, because they've gone to the doctors, they've received their medication, they might have even been in some sort of clinic, and then they call me and they say, look, I've not slept for the last week, and I'm having some problems, but I'm hitting the ceiling when I close my eyes at night, and I'm seeing myself in bed, and it's a very frightening experience, and I think I'm dying or going crazy. And then within about 20 minutes, they're suddenly finding that this experience was one of the most amazing experiences that they've had in their lives, and they really wish they could do it again. It's all a matter of trying to reframe it in a way that says, actually, this is perfectly normal. This is actually who you are, and this is how you begin the journey of self-discovery. You are more than your physical body, as Bob Monroe constantly said. But he also said, go find out. And this is really what we're trying to get people to do, just say, well, forget what the mass media is trying to pump down your throat, I mean, whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, or whatever the motivations might be to tell you that consciousness is epiphenomenal, a byproduct of a brainwave activity that really nobody understands how it all works anyway. And why consciousness arises in the first place. But here we have a situation where you can use your own mental tools. You don't have to build on something you don't have. This is something that you're already equipped with. Kids do this. Children from a very young age have out-of-body experiences. They have lucid dream experiences. They don't have to go into an ashram in order to gain those abilities. They just do it. A lot of what we do at the Monroe Institute is try to get people to get that left brain thinking, that critical analysis, that bit that says, there's only physical things and there's only material things. Get that out the way for just a little bit, maybe 30, 40 minutes during an exercise, and just allow yourself to move into more sort of creative, spontaneous, intuitive thinking, that right brain thinking, and just see what happens. And most of the time, people experience things that normally they wouldn't be conscious of, and that's very empowering once that happens. And it starts to immediately change the way they think about themselves, about other people, and society in general, because they realize very quickly that actually, once you shut down the physical system, there's a lot more going on. And this is something that has no explanation in the mainstream science, because, they want to dismiss that. I mean, it was only up until very recently that lucid dreams were thought of as something that were impossible, an anomaly that surely the people are just making it up, or it's residual dreaming and so on. And only with recent instrumentation and EEGs and eye tracking things have they been able to prove that you can be both in the dream state and also communicating with the physical world using your eye movement, because your eyes don't become paralyzed in the dream state. They carry on moving as well as your respiratory system. So these are things that science is slowly starting to catch on with. But, for thousands of years, I mean, Buddhists have been doing things like dream yoga practices, and various cultures in the world have things like dream time and so on. And these are things that people have known about, natural portals into altered states, which are perfectly natural. But only now is science starting to catch up a little bit. But unfortunately, it's not mainstream science. Bob Monroe stumbled across something using binaural beats, which he found guided your brain into particular states of consciousness. But again, you are more than your physical body. So getting your brain into a particular state isn't enough. You need to have the intention, the belief that you can move into these states and be conscious of them. And if you expect nothing to happen, well, probably nothing will happen, because that's what you're creating as your reality. That's what you're manifesting. But if you just allow those unconscious parts of you to communicate with you and start to speak less in physical language, in this verbal language that we've acquired over recent time, really, and start to think more in symbolic language, in the language of the subconscious, then you'll find that it's a lot easier to build that bridge between your waking self and your subconscious, unconscious self, which is connected to a lot more than this physical reality. That's for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that the work being done in this area, such that it isn't mainstream science.
No.
You go, for example, to your average bookshop, and you go, quite often they now have something they didn't maybe have a generation ago, which is a popular science section. And you can go there and you can find lots of interesting books connecting with the sort of work that the Monroe Institute does. You might get something by, say, someone like Rupert Sheldrake, which is really challenging the mainstream consensus. But then you have very powerful figures like Richard Dawkins, for example, and you know how much his books are selling because you see huge billboard adverts for them in train stations. His mindset, it's very influential. It's really resisting, ironically, a lot of what cutting edge science is beginning to suggest to us about the nature of reality.
Thankfully, there are physicists out there who are starting to postulate theories which are even more radical than what I'm suggesting with out-of-body states. So, the physicists are really pushing something, and I'm not even going to start to attempt to address their theories, but there's certainly a lot more than just the Newtonian sort of physics out there, and that sort of way of thinking, that sort of, maybe there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, is really starting to penetrate into certainly an underground sort of way of thinking. People in pockets that sort of experiment for themselves and read up on a lot of stuff. I mean, I know people like Dawkins are very influential, and really, they're probably right in a lot of regards. But what they're doing is they're almost imposing their own belief system onto everyone else, and really that's kind of something that we try to discourage, because we say, well, go find out. There shouldn't be any dogma, whether that's in some sort of New Age belief system, or whether it's some dogma in scientism, blindly following a particular scientific mainstream view isn't science at all. Actually, you should be inquiring and keeping an open mind about everything. A critical analysis, which is really the hallmark of science. This is something that is certainly appearing a bit more nowadays. I mean, we do have conferences like the Gateways of the Mind, which, maybe even a few years ago wouldn't even have been on the radar, and now you're seeing more of that starting to appear. So as ultimately people have experiences, they have anomalous experiences that don't fit the mainstream, and because they will always have them, because that's who you are, then you can't just completely bury those sorts of ideas under the carpet. And thankfully, there are things like the internet, which allows people to share ideas like that in open forums and that sort of thing, which helps, because it helps people to communicate. I know there's a bunch of Facebook groups on, things like out-of-body experiences and astral projection, lucid dreaming, and consciousness exploration. I mean, these are things that didn't exist even a year ago. Things are growing. It's steady. There is a bit of a momentum starting to build, and certainly there is an optimism in that. At the same time, we have to move forward carefully, in that we don't want to be creating a whole new set of dogmas and belief systems about how you can explore altered states. And that's something that will be a challenge in the coming years, because, people still like to follow gurus and be spoon-fed things. And that's something that really will limit your experience in finding out who you are. I mean, this is not something that somebody can tell you. You can be given the tools, but you do have to find out yourself. You have to go and explore. And sometimes I'll tell you experiences that I've had that don't fit with yours, and that's absolutely fine, because that's my path, and then there's your path. If what I say or anyone else says inspires you to find your own answers, then great. If they just lead to blind belief, then they've missed the point. So that's another challenge as well. It's not just about trying to move away from mainstream science and raise the profile of exploring altered states. It's about how we actually do that in a way that helps people and helps people to discover more about themselves, and not just to jump to somebody else's ready-made answers.
Well, I have, as far as Dawkins and that whole worldview goes, I have a saying that sort of applies here. It's like, if we wish to, say, for example, oppose religious fundamentalism, we should be careful that we don't become too religious or fundamentalist in our opposition. It's very easy, what you fight, you become type of idea. But you made a comment about, and this applies to your own experience, about childhood. And I think this is very significant, because for kids, their actual brain waves are different up to about age 6 or 7. And then again, changes around 14. This was Rudolf Steiner's idea of these 3 developmental stages. And for kids up until 6 or 7, the inner and outer world really are not as separate the way they are for adults.
And I mean, that's something we acquire. And really, up to a certain age, you're mostly in sort of a delta brainwave frequency as well, which is very close to that sleep state. Which is probably why they can get easy access into these altered states, and then things like alpha and beta start kicking in, and we start getting roped into the standard sort of adult brain. But I mean, even then, it's possible to get your brain into delta states, into sort of these regressed states. In order to experience. I mean, that's really what Focus 10 is all about. We try to take you to a borderland sleep state, which is effectively a deep delta, but whilst keeping your mind awake. So maybe the difference between, I suppose, a child experiencing an altered state and an adult experiencing the same one is that if the adult approaches it correctly, they will be able to know that they've shifted into an altered state, whereas for a child, maybe it'll just feel like just part of a daily life cycle, and they won't. I mean, they'll know the difference between waking and dreaming or sleeping, but they'll just think it's just part and parcel of what they do in the day, whereas an adult will notice the shift. And certainly, this is one of the major things that really points to the fact that being able to move into altered states is a natural phenomenon because you do it as a child. And this is why I'm also mentioning again that certain practices that get you into moving into altered states, well, they don't really have to be that difficult. If you find that something is particularly challenging in what you have to believe and think about and visualize this and that, and you've got to do it this way, otherwise nothing happens, well, that really can't be right because you did it when you were a kid, when you didn't have all those beliefs. So really, it's more to do with, instead of having to acquire something, let's subtract some things because you've already got everything. So how do you get out of your own way? What have you added in the way? What are you thinking about that's stopping you from noticing something that's already there? And that's really what maybe doing something as simple as putting on some track which has got some binaural beats in it lets you do. You just lying there, you don't have to do anything. Actually, the less you pay attention to the sounds, the better, really. The less you try to hear the beating frequency, the better, because you just allow that process to take place.
I used to like riding horses when I was a kid, but I've never been on a horse in my life.
All right.
I remember, clear as day, I can remember running around and I was on a horse. I couldn't have been more on a horse than I was then. But, as I say, I don't think I've even ever patted a horse on the nose. But I can't imagine attempting to do that now. I might get some strange looks in the street,
Well, absolutely. Well, you could certainly do that in a lucid dream.
I was going to say, we'll talk about lucid dreaming in a moment, but why don't we just get to that now, actually? Because you've laid out a little bit of what it is. It's the whole brain awake, body asleep. Now, I don't think I've never really discussed this with anybody. I'm not sure I've ever had a proper lucid dreaming experience, but it can be very powerful. It can be a lot of fun. It can be very interesting. It can be terrifying. It can be a lot of things. So perhaps we just shed a little bit more light on that and why, for some people, these experiences can be so profound and actually useful in terms of personal development.
Well, okay, just to really clarify, okay, a lucid dream is a dream in which you're dreaming whilst you're still in the dream. This isn't, some people really think that a lucid dream is a very, very vivid dream or a very, as I say, a very vivid dream, so that when they woke up, they remembered all the details and so on. Yeah, that's a very clear dream. Very easy to remember dream, but it's not a lucid dream. You need to be conscious that you are in the dream state. And most of the time when people have a lucid dream, it's spontaneous. They notice that they're dreaming whilst they're in the dream. So they become lucid from within the dream versus they catch it all on the way down, which you can do if you meditate. You can just allow your body to go to sleep while keeping your mind awake, and therefore the dream just forms around you, so you catch it on the way down. But so these experiences, they can be very short-lived. You'll find that a pig's flying across, and you think, well, pigs don't fly, and that's strange. Now, most of the time, that critical faculty is switched off in the dream state. Somebody will come to you in the dream state and say, oh, well, that pig's flying because, somebody shut off the gravity today. They're just doing some experiments in a lab down there, and that's why the pig's flying. And you say, oh, okay, that's fine. And then you just walk on and start talking with the purple dragons and that kind of thing. Whereas when you become lucid, you kind of have, there's a precursor to it. There's a pre-lucid state which kind of says, something's not right. And what is it? And you stop and think. And it's not often that you do that in the dream. And so you stop and think, well, that's strange. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in waking reality. And therefore you become lucid. At that point, there can be a whole variety of experiences that can follow. Usually a rush of euphoria and adrenaline takes place there, where you realize, oh my God, I'm in a dream. This is amazing. Why am I lucid in a dream? How is this even possible? So you run around and you go, I'm dreaming, and you start screaming at things and pointing at stuff and saying, that's dream stuff, and then that's a dream person, and that's a dream car, and then maybe you fly around for a bit, which is always a very nice way of getting around the world. And you just fly around, and then you suddenly find that you wake up because you were so excited that you woke yourself up. So the dream experience might last anywhere from 10 seconds to a minute or something like that to start with. And so that's your first taste of a lucid dream. When you repeat lucid dreams and you start getting a bit more experience within that state and a bit more proficient at not getting too overwhelmed and excited by being lucid, then you can really start to do a lot of things. Put simply, you are in your own reality, you're in your own head, and everything within the dream state, including your physical body in there, your embodiment, you, is dream stuff. So what you see in the dream is usually like a replica world. You might find yourself in your bedroom, for instance, which is recreated in detail. It might not be exact. Your bed might look different. You might be in bed with someone else. If you look at your body, you're probably wearing different clothes or no clothes, or you have a different shape or something like that. But you're in an environment, you're in yourself, you're still physical, and that's usually how people enter a dream state. But once you can start to move around, you can start to play with those boundaries. So you don't have to walk around places, you can fly, or you can just think yourself in different locations. You don't have to walk downstairs, you just float down them, or just think yourself at the bottom of the stairs. You don't have to open the door, you can just go through it. You can go through walls. You can breathe underwater, you can fly into space. You can do all kinds of things that are fun and interesting. But other than the recreational value of that, you start to really push the belief system of what's possible. And that's very important because, okay, you might not be able to do that yet in the physical world, but just knowing that you can do it somewhere starts to really lay down some sort of mental markers saying that actually you're capable of creating a lot of things, of doing a lot of things. And then you start to move into communication with your subconscious, with your unconscious. Instead of treating everything in the dream as a toy, you can start to interact with it. You can start asking questions to the dream state, and you can use this very creatively. You can do a lot of problem solving within the dream state because the dream's incredibly creative. It just forms itself around you. You don't actively have to create your house, your beach, space, whatever you find yourself. You don't have to do that. You just have to think of yourself being there, and you'll be done. So if you put forward a question or a problem, then the answer will come. And you don't have to worry about how that's going to be done. It's just going to happen because your unconscious works a hell of a lot faster than you do, and it can come up with answers a lot faster. I know a few people who are artists that go around art galleries in the dream state, and there's art exhibitions and the pieces on the wall as soon as they walk in, and they'll just notice something and then get a nice mental image of it and then just wake themselves up and draw it or painted or whatever. This is something that the dream can do. So it's almost a lazy man's way of being incredibly creative. It's direct communication with your intuitive aspect as well. One very powerful use of the lucid dreaming state is for healing yourself. If you have a particular physical problem, a pain or something like that, then you can visualize it. In the dream state, you can invent a tool that you give yourself, a big ball of purple healing energy that you apply to a particular part of your body. You can do that, and oftentimes in the waking state, you'll feel the benefit of that. There's some incredible examples of healing yourself within a dream state. So there's a massive potential for self-healing, almost self-therapy without having to be exposed to painful things. And then the other thing is actually just healing yourself in terms of getting past nightmares and understanding the meaning of why you're having such experiences. And because usually what we would class as negative experiences, frightening experiences, are just the dream's way of trying to get your attention, trying to point something out to you that you should be aware of. So here we have the ability to be conscious in that state, so we can directly ask the monster that's chasing us, what do you represent? What are you trying to tell me? And then you can send it some healing, some love energy or something like that, and you'll find that it changes form, or it will give you a message and say, all right, okay, now you're paying attention, right? Well, this is what I wanted to tell you, and then it'll tell you what it is that was hidden by the symbol of that feared object, that nightmare. So there's a lot of work that you can do within a dream state to make yourself more complete, more whole.
the history of mankind, whether it's been through meditation, shamanic practices, or use of psychedelic substances and other things, dancing, drumming, all sorts of things, history has really been about accessing altered states of consciousness and realizing that they were very important and very useful, and that this was not some sort of, it was not just a dream, that there was a reality there that for many peoples down history was more real and more important than our normal waking reality.
Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the things, when you go into an altered state, and I'm talking about lucid dreams, I'm talking about out-of-body experiences, you can move into different levels of those states. So it's not just like, all right, you're lucid and in a dream and that's it. There are levels to that, and same with the out-of-body state. And some of these lead to perceptions which are far beyond what you can perceive in the physical system using your 5 physical senses. You end up with hyper reality states, and this is something that really, in terms of being able to describe it in language, you just can't do it. Some have tried and have succeeded to varying degrees, and probably have to refer to analogies and almost poetic language. And this idea of hyperreality, actually moving into a state which is away from your physical system, but is actually more real, really does start to push the boundaries of what is real, what is what reality is in the first place. And so I think that's kind of a major sort of benefit of being able to move into altered states, to actually see how far you can push it, how you can perceive once you take the filters off. I mean, sometimes I go into altered states and I manage to dissolve my body form, because it's quite something to be able to move around in the physical body and recreate that in an out-of-body state. But once, as Bob Monroe said it, once the jelly's out of the mold, then it can settle, and actually it loses the body form and it can just turn into something else. And you can actually become all of your environment at once. You actually can move into states where you as an entity, as a being, ceases to be in that sort of I'm here and the environment's over there. You become all things at once, and you can understand an interconnection, a greater reality, which is certainly not possible in the physical state, not as we navigate it now anyway. I'm sure it is possible, and I suppose that's what the Buddhists allude to with enlightenment. But with moving into an altered state, you're already in a more refined state of consciousness, because you're not having to think about your physical body, and therefore these hyper-real dimensions are open to you. And I think this is something that has been lost over time, because once upon a time we used to go into these states, and that's where we used to get information. We used to tap into aspects of ourselves, aspects that are connected with the wider reality, to give us information about our world and our current situation, and help us in our lives. Now we look for that information around us from the media, from what scientists are telling us, what the news is telling us, and so on. So we've actually become incredibly lazy at being able to get that information, and we don't really give ourselves enough time to explore things for ourselves, to find our own answers. We just think that somebody's just going to tell us at some point, and that's really where I think we've started to hide a particular path that was available to us. But it doesn't really take much to actually get back there and find the massive value in being able to do that. So all is not lost, but it's just going to take a little bit of time to be able to have the confidence to move into that path again.
Now, to dip into the science of this, you mentioned earlier the hemispheric synchronization, or Hemi-Sync, in the Monroe Institute context, and this refers to the 2 hemispheres of the brains. Perhaps you could say a little bit about what's actually going on there in respect to the aforementioned binaural beats.
Sure. Okay, well, first of all, you have the brain, and this brain is divided into 2 halves called hemispheres, and they're connected by a bunch of fibers in the middle, which form something called the corpus callosum. Now, that's how the brain hemispheres talk to each other, through this sort of realization in between. Now, what we talk about as left brain and right brain. I mean, really, we're talking in gross generalizations, but if we were to say that a hemisphere is specialized for something, then we're not saying that the activity only happens in that one side of the brain. It happens in both, but it's mainly in one. So it's a dominant side. So we live right now in a culture that's very left brain dominant, one which is very objective. It likes things sort of in black and white. It's a little bit inflexible. It's very logically driven, and that's what we tend to promote in especially Western society, in our schooling system. You know, you get things right. 2 + 2 = 4. If you put 5, it's wrong, and that's how it is. And that's a left brain question with a left brain solution, and that's what we promote. But then we get into a situation where maybe we promoted at work all the left brain people, and they're all sat around in a boardroom, and these are your senior executives, and the company suddenly has a problem. The market's changing, people's interests have gone elsewhere, and now you need somebody who's creative, a creative idea in the group to change the track and move into a different direction, one that might be profitable. You know, a very left brain problem again. But you filter out all the right brain people, the creative types, the subjective thinkers, the ones who are more intuitive and spontaneous, the ones who operate from the heart space, really. They get a raw deal in our society. You know, these are the artists and poets, the creative thinkers, who very rarely make it mainstream. And when they do, I mean, it's still not as well paid as being a left brain thinker. And so we have this divided sort of brain problem in our society and in ourselves. You know, you might find that as I'm talking now, you can identify yourself as being a little bit more left-brained or right-brained. What we try to do with Hemi-Sync, and really this is kind of the beauty of it, is that because you play binaural beats, and I'll tell you something a little bit about binaural beats first of all. The way they work is that, crudely put, because it is a bit more complicated than this, a tone is played in one ear. So a particular sound frequency is played in one ear, your left ear, independent of a sound being played in your right ear. And so the two tones will be of a different frequency, but your brain doesn't hear two separate tones. What it does is it works out the phase difference between those two tones and starts to create a new tone, a third tone, which is only heard in your head. And it's the difference between the two tones. So if you played something like a 100 hertz tone in one ear and 104 in the other, then your brain doesn't hear those two tones separately, but it starts to hear the difference between the two, which would be 4 hertz. So you start to hear a vibrato. Instead of like a do and a do, you do like a bo 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 bo. And that vibrato isn't on the exercise. It isn't on the CD or whatever you're listening to. It's purely in your brain, and it's only created by your two hemispheres working together to produce that tone. Now, the beauty of that is that, first of all, coming back to the left-right brain problem, you start to engage both the left and right hemispheres of your brain in order to make that tone happen, to move into a particular state that tone is trying to get you into. Your brain has to work in unison. You get a whole brain way of thinking. So if you're a very left brain person, then you will start to find that your right brain will start to have more input, and vice versa. So sometimes you might be the poor artist but doesn't have a business plan. Well, now your left brain's coming in and actually helping you out with that. Or if you're that left brain thinker who needs a creative solution, then suddenly you find that coming in. So that's a spontaneous kind of benefit that you'll get from listening to Hemi-Sync, from engaging in listening to binaural beats. The other thing is that right now your brain and the way it communicates, it does so by electrical impulses. So right now, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying, it's probably in a high alpha, low beta frequency, around about 13, 14 hertz, which is pulsing at particular cycles per second, so 13 or 14 cycles per second. But as you start to approach sleep, then really, that example I gave, which was 4 hertz, that corresponds more like with a delta or a low theta. So if you wanted to put someone to sleep, you would play a binaural beat which produces that 4 hertz tone, And after about 5 or 10 minutes, then you'll find that the brain waves of that individual will start to follow the 4 hertz tone that's being produced by the binaural beating. So you actually guide the brain in something called a frequency following response into a particular frequency. So if you want to put someone to sleep, you play something with 4 hertz. If you want to get someone in a more of a meditative state, then you'd probably play something with a bit more alpha in it or theta, so you kind of keep them around about maybe the 7 or 8 hertz band or something like that. But we layered it up with Hemi-Sync. There's not just one frequency playing, because your brain's a lot more complicated than just being in one frequency at a time. Actually, all of them are going on to varying degrees, and so we really layer it up so that particular sounds are doing certain things to particular parts of your brain. And, so that you can end up in that sort of mind awake, body asleep state and so on. So that's kind of in a nutshell, how Hemi-Sync works. It just gets your left and right brain hemispheres working together to guide your brain into a particular sound frequency.
So we've already spoken about some of the benefits that these sort of practices and experiences can offer, but certainly some of the programs offered by the Monroe Institute go beyond that in many ways. And we're looking at like serious life-changing experiences, improvements for people, in all sorts of areas, to do with their just a general, if you want to use a term like inner peace or discovering your true essence, what you're doing with your life. Maybe you can get a focus and a purpose that wasn't there before. Maybe you come to a realization that, and this bothers a lot of people in the West, you come to the realization that existence isn't just meaningless after all. It can affect your attitude to death, perhaps. Saying that this life isn't everything in the same way that, consciousness isn't your body. So all of these ideas go beyond however beneficial problem solving might be, or getting more creative or getting more analytical if that's what you need. There really is ways to tap into human potential here that are very profound.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got to start somewhere, Greg. Sometimes people might find that they want to have incredible experiences, but they're really poor with their thinking in terms of, their mind being all over the place, and they sleep bad, and they can't get relaxed and so on. So you need to start off with something that's very practical in that regard. Get people to move into a mentally and physically relaxed state. Reclaim your sleep, know how to sleep properly, because things can build on that. Know how to think straight so that you can tap into your own creativity and not have to worry every time that you have to think through a problem or something like that. So you move away from, I suppose, the physical world problems by getting those sorts of things in line. But after that, yes, you can certainly tap into what we would class as a wider reality, the greater reality, and what Bob Monroe referred to as gaining a different overview. The idea here is that once you can start to understand and not just believe, but actually know that you are more than your physical body, then what does that mean? What purpose is there for you? What can you find out about yourself, about how you're supposed to relate to the environment and those around you? What kind of person can you become? Where can you go with your mind? And these are questions that, and many, many more, that you can start asking once you can gain confidence to be able to move into altered states, and not think that this is an all or nothing. If you have an experience, however trivial it might seem, you were able to maybe peel out of your body just a little bit, but then it lasted 10 seconds and you snap back in. Well, physically. And in the mainstream, that shouldn't be possible. You should not be able to separate from your physical body or move into an altered state consciously. So what does that mean? What are the implications of being a being that can exist outside of the physical senses? And these are questions that we ask at the Monroe Institute, starting off with the Gateway Voyage, which is designed to introduce you to the state of mind awake, body asleep, but also then start to move into those states of expanded awareness and no-time states, and then states that really are on the edge of the physical system and non-physical. And then, things like the Lifeline program, well, we're really starting to go far out there now. We're starting to move to areas that once you're no longer physical, well, where do you end up? What are these areas? What are these states of consciousness? Who can you see there? Can you help anyone who might need assistance in these states? And where can you go for further learning and planning and getting new directions for your life journey? So these are things that we certainly touch on at the Monroe Institute, and the programs go even further out than that. But I mean, this is something that you build on over time. You have to digest these experiences and really integrate them, because you might have a peak experience at a Monroe Institute program that will change you for life. You might make some connection with your inner self, or somebody who's passed over and it gives you a message or something like that, and you suddenly find that your worldview is just completely radically altered, and you need to be able to digest that. Thankfully, we've kind of heard a lot of it. I mean, people's experiences are certainly unique, but they fall within particular categories. So we're always there as trainers to be able to assist people on that journey.
Well, all of those questions and possibilities that you just posed, if there's someone there listening to this thinking, yeah, this is interesting, this is nice, but it's still a bit rainbows and unicorns, sort of new age stuff. From my perspective, that couldn't be farther from the truth, because all of the things we've been discussing, it affects how we see ourselves, how we see wider reality. That has a very, very practical application. That affects how we conduct our lives and how we see other people and the world at large. And if we look at what's going on in waking reality right now on planet Earth, we're in a lot of trouble. And there are increasing numbers of people are changing the way that they see themselves and think about wider reality. And a lot of positive things are happening as a result. And it couldn't be a more critical time for this to be happening now. And some researchers and some cutting edge scientists, some spiritual thinkers, they're speaking of nothing less than the evolution of consciousness, and that this may be our time that we're living in now, a very important step on this journey.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the biggest problem that we have right now is that because I suppose the pendulum swung so strongly in favor of materialism, that people really do think I'll just get what I can while I'm here, and then that's the end of it. And that's causing a lot of problems in the world, because it just really it really separates people off from each other, and through experiencing more than your physical body, through understanding the interconnectedness that people share, then you see that actually no man is an island, and you experience that directly. You are connected with everyone, and your actions have implications that really run quite far, and you can change things. Even on an individual level, you can do a lot of things that can improve the world. Just by becoming a more kinder individual, just to start with. I mean, we could do with relating with each other a lot nicer and a lot better. And this is something that we're doing less and less. We're shutting ourselves off from people, and becoming a very cynical society as well. We kind of like to just hide behind the shield of the internet and just post negative comments on Facebook and cynical things and all that sort of stuff, but actually going out there and engaging with people face to face and interacting with them in a meaningful way is unfortunately lacking at this stage. So this is something that would help people to open their eyes a bit more, and to actually see that there is more going on, that you are more than your physical body, and actually it's very easy to find that out. So now what? How do we all move forward? And these are very important questions that we need to be asking right now. But we certainly need a bit of momentum in numbers in order for something to radically change where we're going right now.
Well, as we begin to wind things up for today, Luigi, perhaps you mentioned it briefly in passing earlier on, but we should let people know about the forthcoming Gateways of the Mind conference that's happening here in England next month. So just tell us a little bit about that, and maybe a sort of sneak preview of what your presentation or workshop will be about.
Well, the Gateways of the Mind conference, for those of you who didn't attend last November in London, is a wonderful conference where a lot of consciousness pioneers and real people with some fantastic ideas on how to explore consciousness, and with a lot of experience of doing that, are going to be gathering together a lot of consciousness explorers are going to be gathering together in London on the 9th and 10th of November to discuss all kinds of ways and practices and methods for exploring consciousness and the wider implications of that. I don't think there's anything else on the calendar like it. It's certainly an event that if you can make it, then is worthwhile being there, because it's just so unique in terms of being able to interact with so many like-minded individuals. Certainly everyone has their own background and their own path, but it's nice to be able to share in an environment where people are open to actually discussing things that are more than what's accessible just with their physical senses. So it's going to be a wonderful event. You've got speakers like William Buhlman and Tim Freak, Stanley Krippner. There's some Charlie Morley, who's a great lucid dreaming teacher, and it's going to be a fantastic event. I'm going to be talking about belief systems in particular, discussing the belief system territories that Bob Monroe talked about, the areas outside of the physical system, but also in particular what our beliefs mean when we are exploring consciousness, and how just following things and believing things versus knowing things can actually get in the way of your own progress, and what we can do to actually to sidestep those problems to uncovering a greater reality.
Excellent. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the Monroe Institute now established in the UK. If listeners are interested in programs there, perhaps you could just tell them where to get more information and anything else you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, if you want to find out more, we do have a website, which is www.monroeinstituteuk.org. That has our programs listed on there, some information and background, and you can find out about Hemi-Sync and also the new technology that we've been working on, which is SAM, and ways of contacting us from there. We also have a Facebook page which we like to update. Again, if you just look up Monroe Institute UK, you'll find that. So we like to keep people informed that way, and it's easy enough to get hold of us. And if you have any sort of questions and you'd like to find out more, then just feel free to really contact us. I mean, we try to make ourselves available for any sort of question, however trivial you might find it to be. But we're all here to help each other on this path. So we welcome anyone to contact us.
Wonderful. Well, Luigi, thank you so much for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Well, folks, that's it for another week. As ever, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please check out the website. That's LegalizeFreedom.com, legalize-freedom.com, where you'll find an archive of programs offering alternative views on a wide range of topics, including world affairs, politics and economics, science and technology, religion and spirituality, conspiracy, and alternative history. You can also browse and buy a range of books and DVDs from our guests, and if you're feeling generous, make a donation to help keep the site up and running. Until next time, I'm Greg Moffat, and you've been listening to LegalizeFreedom.com.